People think betrayal always comes with shouting, tears, or slammed doors. Sometimes it comes with a smile and a seating chart. I was standing in the lobby of the St. Regis, surrounded by marble floors and crystal light, dressed like a woman who belonged there because I did. Every detail of this wedding existed because of me. The flowers, the orchestra, the imported linens, the custom dance floor. All of it charged to my card after my brother and his fiancée decided they deserved luxury without the inconvenience of paying for it. Tonight wasn't about money, though. Tonight was supposed to be about family. I checked my reflection one last time. Calm, composed, powerful. I looked like the woman who had quietly rescued her family more times than she could count. Then I walked toward the ballroom doors, already imagining my place at the family table, right beside my mother and brother. That's when Tiffany stepped in front of me. She looked flawless. Of course she did. I'd paid for that dress when her card mysteriously declined. She raised her champagne glass like this was a casual chat. "Simone," she said, smiling too hard, "there's been a small change." I stopped walking. "A change?" I asked. She nodded. "Seating. You won't be at the head table anymore." I let the words settle. "Why?" Her eyes flicked briefly to my dress, then back to my face. "We're going for a very curated look. Soft tones, light colors. We want the photos to feel cohesive." Cohesive. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "You have a very strong presence. On camera, it could pull focus." I didn't speak. I wanted to hear her finish. She gestured toward the back of the room. "Table 28 is perfect. You'll be near the service doors, out of the main frame." Near the kitchen. "You're moving me," I said slowly, "so I don't ruin your pictures." She sighed, annoyed. "Don't make it about race or feelings. It's just aesthetics." That's when my mother appeared beside her, already nodding in agreement. "Simone, please, this is Tiffany's day. You don't need to be front and center. You've always been behind the scenes." Behind the scenes. Like the money, like the sacrifices, like me. I looked past them and saw the head table. My name card was gone. In my chair sat a woman I barely knew, laughing, sipping champagne I had paid for, perfectly matching their aesthetic. That's when I understood. They didn't just move my seat, they replaced me. Tiffany watched my face carefully, waiting for anger, waiting for a scene, waiting for me to prove whatever ugly story she already had prepared about me. Instead, I smiled. "Okay," I said, calmly. Her shoulders relaxed. She thought she'd won. What she didn't know was this. I wasn't losing a seat. I was reclaiming everything else. They thought I'd quietly disappear into the shadows. What they didn't realize was that I was about to turn the lights off on their entire life. Before we go any further, if you enjoy stories where disrespect meets consequences, make sure you subscribe now. You don't want to miss how this unfolds. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't give Tiffany the reaction she was starving for. That confused her. "Table 28 is right over there," she said, pointing toward the back corner near the swinging doors. "Dinner service will start soon." I nodded politely. "Of course." Then I turned away, not toward the table she'd banished me to, but toward the center of the ballroom. That's when people started watching. When you walk with certainty, others feel it. Conversations softened as I passed. Glasses paused mid-air. Heads turned. These weren't random guests. These were Atlanta's elite. Executives, athletes, investors. People who knew exactly who I was, even if they pretended not to. I wasn't the groom's sister. I was the woman who fixed problems. As I moved, I started adding things up in my head. Not emotionally, financially. Numbers don't lie, even when families do. The legal fees, the debts, the temporary loans that never came back, the wedding itself. Every invoice had my name on it. And suddenly, something became very clear. I wasn't a guest here. I was the sponsor. The gift table sat under its own spotlight, dressed up like a shrine. At the center of it all was the oversized check, loud, performative, and designed to announce generosity without effort. $100,000, a down payment for the house they couldn't qualify for without me. I stopped in front of it. A few people laughed nervously, thinking I was posing for a photo. I wasn't. I reached for the latch on the glass case. The click echoed louder than it should have. The room didn't go silent, but it leaned in. I lifted the display lid and pulled out the check. On the sweetheart stage, Tiffany froze mid-toast. Marcus turned, confusion sliding into panic as he recognized what I was holding. I didn't rush. I didn't look angry. I simply held the check up long enough for the cameras to see it, long enough for everyone to understand this wasn't an accident. Then I tore it. Once, twice, again. The sound ripped through the ballroom like fabric under tension. Gasps followed. Someone dropped a fork. The orchestra stopped playing. But the real gift wasn't the prop. It was the envelope beneath it, the actual check, the future they thought was secured. I slipped it into my clutch and snapped it shut. That's when Marcus reached me, gripping my arm like he could still control the outcome. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "You're embarrassing us." I looked at his hand on my skin, then back at his face. "No," I said quietly. "I'm correcting a mistake." I leaned in so only he could hear me. "She told me to stay out of the frame. So I am." Then I stepped back, turned around, and began walking toward the exit. Behind me, the whispers erupted. Ahead of me was something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. They thought losing the money was the worst part, but 3 days later, when they landed for their honeymoon, they finally realized how expensive disrespect really is. Before I continue, drop a comment below and answer this. What would you have done in my place? Walk away quietly or take everything back? I want to read your thoughts. I didn't look back as I walked out of the ballroom. The doors closed behind me with a heavy thud, sealing in the music, the laughter, and the illusion that everything was fine. The hallway outside was quiet, too quiet. My heels echoed against marble as adrenaline surged through my body, sharp and electric. I reached the valet, accepted my keys, and slid into the driver's seat. The engine purred to life, smooth and obedient. For the first time all night, I exhaled. Then my phone started vibrating. Once, twice, then non-stop. I flipped it face down without looking. I already knew who it was. Marcus, my mother, Tiffany, people who never noticed me unless they needed something fixed. As I pulled onto the road, a strange calm settled in. Not sadness, not anger, clarity. I wasn't grieving a family, I was escaping a contract. By the time I reached my apartment, the phone was lighting up like a warning signal. Missed calls stacked on top of missed calls. Texts followed the same pattern, confusion turning to panic, panic turning to rage. I poured a glass of wine and finally checked one message. "Marcus, you went too far. Bring it back. We need to talk." Need. That word again. I scrolled. "My mother. How could you embarrass us like this? Fix it, now." Fix it. Always fix it. I sat back on the couch and stared at the city lights outside my window. Years of memories surfaced. Not the happy ones, but the quiet expectations. Be strong, be responsible, be useful, don't complain, don't shine too brightly, don't take up space. That's when I realized something terrifying for them and liberating for me. I had always been the safety net, and safety nets disappear when you stop holding them up. I opened my laptop and logged into my accounts. Not emotionally, not impulsively, but methodically. I wasn't angry. I was strategic. Then I saw it. A fresh charge, still pending. 2 first-class airline tickets, international, booked minutes after I left the ballroom. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. Even after humiliating me, even after watching me take the gift back, they still assumed I'd pay. That assumption was their real mistake. I closed the laptop without touching anything. Not yet. Let them fly, I thought. Let them relax. Let them believe they got away with it. I placed my phone face down again as it buzzed relentlessly. 90 calls by morning, more messages than I bothered to read. And for the first time in my life, I didn't respond. Not because I couldn't, but because silence was the first boundary they'd ever respected, even if it scared them to death. They thought my silence meant weakness. But 3 days later, at 30,000 feet in the air, they learned exactly how loud consequences can be. Before we continue, I want your opinion in the comments. Should family always get unlimited chances, or is there a point where access should be revoked? Your answers matter more than you think. 3 days passed. 3 full days of silence. No explanations, no arguments, no emotional paragraphs trying to justify disrespect. I let the quiet stretch, because silence makes entitled people tell on themselves. By the time they landed for their honeymoon, they were confident again. I knew this because I saw it online. Champagne flutes clinked in a first-class cabin, smiles wide, captions about finally relaxing and protecting our peace. Tiffany posted like nothing had happened, as if erasing me from the wedding erased reality. What she didn't understand was simple. You can't protect peace using someone else's wallet. I watched their stories without reacting. No messages, no warnings, just observation. The resort was expensive. Private island, overwater villas, everything curated for appearance rather than responsibility. Exactly their taste. They upgraded the room, booked a yacht, scheduled spa treatments, all of it charged to a card they didn't own. By the second night, the total was already staggering, and still, I waited. I wanted them comfortable. I wanted them careless. Then, calmly, deliberately, I opened my laptop. I didn't rage. I didn't hesitate. I simply selected the supplementary card attached to my account and clicked deactivate. No drama, no announcement. Just reality. Minutes later, my phone lit up. First text. Hey sis, the card isn't going through. Can you check? I didn't reply. Second text. It's embarrassing. The waiter is standing here. Then the calls came, one after another. Marcus, Tiffany, back to Marcus. I imagined it clearly, the pause at the table, the forced laughter, the quiet tension as the card machine beeped again and again. Another text came through. Please, fix this. That word again. Fix. I placed my phone down and poured myself water. I wasn't angry anymore. I was finished. Minutes later, an alert popped up. Transaction declined. I smiled. They were finally experiencing what it felt like to stand somewhere you don't belong, waiting for someone else to decide if you're worth saving. They thought a declined card was the worst moment, but what happened next involved passports, security, and a call that ended their future back home. Quick reminder, if you're enjoying the story and want to see how deep accountability really goes, hit subscribe now. This next part is where everything collapses. When the card declined, they still believed it was a glitch. That's the thing about people who've never faced consequences. They always assume the system is broken, never the privilege. At first, Marcus tried confidence. Sir, that card always works, he said, forcing a laugh as the server stood beside the table, polite but unmoving. Let me just make a quick call. Tiffany's smile was frozen, her eyes darting around the restaurant. This wasn't just any place. It was one of those ultra-luxury dining rooms where whispers carry and embarrassment echoes. Other guests had begun to notice. Phones lowered, conversations slowed. I imagined Marcus stepping away, pacing, dialing my number again. Straight to voicemail. Then the messages changed. "Simone, answer your phone. This isn't funny. We're in another country." Still, I didn't respond, because I wasn't the one who put them there. A few minutes later, the manager arrived. Calm, professional, unsmiling. "I'm afraid the payment has been declined multiple times," he said. "We'll need another form of settlement." Marcus offered excuses. Tiffany offered tears. Neither offered money, because they didn't have any. That's when the word passport entered the conversation, and everything changed. Their phones came out at the same time. Calls, texts, voice notes piling up. My screen lit up over and over while I sat comfortably thousands of miles away, sipping water and breathing freely. I knew what they were realizing. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was abandonment. But the truth was simpler. I hadn't abandoned them. I had stopped rescuing them. Back home, I made one more call. Not to them. To the real estate broker handling the house they were supposed to close on in days. "I'm withdrawing my guarantor support," I said calmly, effective immediately. Silence on the other end. "That ends the deal," he finally replied. "I know," I said. "Please notify the sellers." With one sentence, the house disappeared. The future they'd been bragging about, gone. Back on that island, the pressure intensified. Resort security became involved, deadlines were given, options ran out. And still, I said nothing. Because this time, silence wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. They thought the worst had already happened, but what they didn't know was that the internet, the truth, and a single recording were about to meet, and nothing survives that collision. While they were spiraling on that island, something else was happening. Something they never anticipated. The internet was waking up. Tiffany did what she always did when control slipped out of her hands. She went public. From a hotel lobby with soft lighting and carefully chosen angles, she went live. Robe on, hair slightly messy, eyes glossy but makeup intact. The performance was flawless. She spoke in a trembling voice about betrayal, about being financially trapped, about how her husband's sister had lured them into dependency and then cut them off out of jealousy. The comments exploded. "That's abuse. Family shouldn't do this. She sounds evil." And just like that, I was the villain. I watched it all without emotion. I'd spent my career managing scandals bigger than this. Athletes, executives, politicians, people with real power. I knew one thing the internet always respected: proof. So, I didn't argue. I prepared. I set up my camera in my office. No filters, no background music, no tears. Just me, calm and centered. When I went live, my tone wasn't defensive, it was surgical. "My name is Simone," I said. "I'm here to clarify misinformation." Behind me, a screen lit up. A spreadsheet. Row after row. Date, amount, description. Legal fees, debt payments, rent assistance, credit card bailouts, travel, medical bills, wedding expenses. Total at the bottom? Nearly $500,000. "I didn't abuse anyone," I said evenly. "I funded adults who felt entitled to my resources." The comments shifted instantly. "Wait, that's real money. She kept receipts. This is wild." Then I showed the credit card statement. Highlighted charge? Honeymoon flights. Booked the night of the wedding, after I'd been publicly disrespected. They weren't stranded, I said. They were spending freely on my account. But I wasn't finished. There's one more thing, I added. The screen changed. An audio file. I record events I pay for, I explained calmly, for liability reasons. I pressed play. Tiffany's voice filled the room, unfiltered, unguarded, talking about aesthetics, about skin tone, about moving me near the kitchen so I wouldn't ruin the pictures. The comments turned brutal. That's racist. She said what? Unforgivable. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply said, she asked me to stay out of the frame, so I did, and I took my money with me. Then I ended the stream. Within minutes, brand accounts began commenting on Tiffany's page. Partnerships paused, contracts terminated, follower counts dropped fast. She wasn't just losing a vacation anymore. She was losing her image. And once that cracks, everything else follows. They thought exposure was the end, but the real damage happened next when the consequences followed them all the way back home. The internet moved faster than I expected. By the time I closed my laptop, Tiffany's live video had been clipped, reposted, dissected, and stitched 1,000 different ways. The narrative flipped in real time. Sympathy evaporated. Accountability took its place. But the internet wasn't the real reckoning. Family was. My phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Marcus or Tiffany. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. Her message came through seconds later, sharp, breathless, furious. "How could you do this to us?" she demanded. "People are calling. Church members are asking questions. Do you know how this looks?" That's when it hit me. She wasn't asking how I was. She wasn't apologizing. She was embarrassed, not by what they did, but by the fact that it was public. I didn't call her back. Instead, I watched the security feed from my building's lobby. She appeared an hour later, pacing, demanding access, voice raised. The woman who had always expected me to fix things had finally run into a door that wouldn't open. Security escorted her out. For the first time, she had to leave without getting what she wanted. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, the honeymoon officially ended. The resort gave Marcus a final deadline. Without payment, authorities would be contacted. He scrambled, calling lenders, old friends, anyone who might help. That's when the mask fell. The Rolex he'd always flaunted? Fake. The confidence? Hollow. The safety net? Gone. He signed a predatory loan just to get them home. Terms so bad I would have shut it down instantly if I still cared. But I didn't. Back in Atlanta, the house deal collapsed publicly. Listings went back online. Whispers spread fast. The golden child wasn't golden anymore, just exposed. And the strangest part? I felt light. Not vindictive, not cruel. Unburdened. I wasn't burning bridges anymore. I was finally standing on solid ground. They thought getting home meant starting over, but home was about to reject them just as thoroughly as I had. By the time their plane touched down, the story had already beaten them there. They expected relief, familiar ground, a chance to regroup, explain, spin the narrative. Marcus believed that once they were back in Atlanta, things would stabilize. Old favors, old faces, old assumptions. He forgot one thing. Atlanta talks. And Atlanta had already decided. They didn't walk off that plane like newlyweds. They walked off like survivors of a scandal. Heads down, movements rushed. Tiffany kept her sunglasses on even inside the terminal, as if plastic frames could shield her from recognition. They were wrong. Phones came out almost immediately. Whispers followed them through the gate. Someone laughed, not cruelly, but knowingly. The kind of laugh that says, "I know exactly who you are." By the time they reached baggage claim, the tension between them was thick enough to touch. "This is your fault," Tiffany snapped under her breath. Marcus didn't answer. He had already checked his phone, missed calls from the broker, messages from lenders, notifications from accounts he didn't recognize, people tagging him in posts he didn't want to see. The house was gone, the image was gone, and now the money was gone too. They went to my mother's house first, not out of comfort, but necessity. The rental they'd planned to move into while waiting for the mansion? Never secured. Deposits required, credit checks failed. The front door opened to chaos. My mother wasn't crying. She was furious. "You ruined everything," she shouted the moment they stepped inside. "Do you know what people are saying about this family?" Still, no one asked how I felt. Still, no one acknowledged why it happened. That was when Marcus finally understood something he should have learned years ago. The protection was gone. The next morning, eviction notices started arriving. Not theirs, but hers. Missed payments she assumed I'd covered. Accounts she thought were handled. The house she stood in wasn't hers anymore. I wasn't punishing them. I was no longer carrying them. And without that support, the illusion collapsed completely. They thought losing the house was the bottom, but the real reckoning came when they realized I wasn't coming back. When people finally understand they've lost power, they don't apologize. They negotiate. That's exactly what happened a week later. I was finishing a late breakfast when my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen since the wedding. An unfamiliar number, but I already knew who it was. Marcus never called directly anymore, not when pride was injured. I let it ring. Then a message came through. "Hey sis, can we talk? Just you and me?" No apology. No accountability. Just an opening like nothing had happened. I waited an hour before responding. About what? The reply came instantly. "Everything. We've all been under a lot of stress. Things got out of hand." Things didn't get out of hand. They were revealed. We met in a quiet cafe downtown. Neutral ground. No witnesses they could manipulate. Marcus arrived first. No designer watch, no tailored confidence. Just exhaustion wrapped in frustration. When Tiffany walked in behind him, she didn't sit. She hovered. "I don't understand why you did this," she said, arms crossed. "You didn't have to destroy our lives." I sipped my coffee calmly. I didn't destroy anything. I stopped funding it. Marcus leaned forward. "Look, you made your point, but this has gone far enough. Brands dropped her. Deals fell through. Mom's house." I held up my hand. "This is the part where you apologize," I said. Silence. Tiffany scoffed. "For what? For wanting nice photos?" That was my answer. I stood, placed cash on the table, and picked up my bag. "This meeting is over," I said. "There's nothing left to discuss." Marcus panicked. "Wait, what about family?" I looked at him one last time. Family doesn't put you by the kitchen door and then demand access to your wallet. I walked out without another word. They thought that was the end. But desperation always makes people try one last move. Desperation doesn't make people honest. It makes them reckless. 3 days after the cafe meeting, I got an alert. Not from family, but from my lawyer. Someone attempted to dispute past transfers, the message read, claiming coercion. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. When entitlement fails emotionally, it reaches for legality. Marcus had tried to reframe 10 years of financial support as manipulation. Tiffany backed it up with statements about emotional pressure and family obligation. They weren't trying to win. They were trying to scare me. So I responded the only way that works, with facts. My attorney sent back a neatly organized file, signed gift letters, voluntary transfer records, Text messages thanking me, voice notes asking, begging for help. One message stood out. Tiffany, 2 years earlier. You're such a blessing. I don't know how we'd survive without you. The dispute collapsed within 48 hours. Then came the next attempt, a public apology video. Tiffany posted it late at night, eyes red, voice shaky. She talked about growth, learning, and misunderstandings. She never said the word sorry, not once. The comments weren't buying it. People recognize fake humility the same way they recognize luxury bought on credit. Marcus followed with his own post. Short, defensive, framed himself as caught in the middle. That's when I realized something important. They still believed I'd soften, that I'd step in and clean this up like I always had. I didn't. I blocked them both. And in that moment, something irreversible happened. They lost access, not just to money, to me. They thought silence meant I'd moved on, but what came next was the quietest, most final consequence of all. Cutting them off didn't feel dramatic. It felt clean. No more vibrating phone, no more late-night emergencies disguised as family moments, no more guilt wrapped in obligation. For the first time in my adult life, my calendar belonged to me. That's when the real change began. I started noticing how much space they had occupied, not physically, but mentally. Decisions I delayed because someone might need help. Trips I skipped because I was on call. Money I saved, not for joy, but for inevitable rescue missions. Without them, the noise disappeared. And in that quiet, I heard myself. I took a trip I'd postponed for years. Nothing extravagant, just a place where no one knew my last name or my family story. I walked slowly, ate when I was hungry, slept without checking my phone every hour. No emergencies came. The world didn't collapse. Back home, I redecorated my apartment, not because it needed it, but because I could. I chose things that felt like me, not like something safe or practical or explainable. I stopped over-explaining. At work, something shifted too. Without the constant drain, my focus sharpened. Opportunities I'd ignored suddenly felt possible. I stopped shrinking to stay available. And the strangest part? No one replaced them. There was no void. Because what I'd mistaken for love had actually been labor. Occasionally, I heard updates through mutuals. Marcus was working 2 jobs. Tiffany disappeared from social media entirely. My mother downsized quietly, telling people it was by choice. No one reached out again. Not to apologize, not to reconnect. And that told me everything I needed to know. They expected regret. But the final part isn't about them at all. It's about what happens when you finally choose yourself. People still ask me if I regret it, if I miss them, if I ever think about what would have happened if I just swallowed the insult, taken the back table, smiled for the pictures, and paid for the rest, like I always did. The truth? That seat was never the point. The seat was just the moment the mask slipped. What really ended that night wasn't a relationship, it was a pattern. A lifetime of being valued only for what I provided, never for who I was. The wedding didn't break us, it revealed us. I didn't lose a family, I gained clarity. When you stop funding dysfunction, people call you cold. When you stop accepting disrespect, they call you difficult. And when you finally choose yourself, they call it selfish. Let them. Selfishness saved my life. I learned that boundaries don't require permission, that generosity without limits isn't kindness, it's self-erasure, and that the people who benefit most from your silence will always fear your voice. Sometimes I think about the girl I used to be, the one who believed love was something you proved by sacrifice. I wish I could tell her this. Love that costs you your dignity is not love. I don't need revenge. I don't need apologies. I don't need closure from people who never saw me clearly. I closed the door myself, and on the other side of it, I built a life that doesn't require me to disappear so others can shine. If this story resonates with you, let it be a reminder not to wait for a dramatic moment, but to listen the first time someone shows you who you are to them. Because sometimes the smallest insult reveals the biggest truth. And walking away isn't losing, it's winning.